Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never practice nunchucks in a crowded room. Never eat chole before a road trip. Always take your shirt off before you iron it. Don't take a call near a swimming pool. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
This is episode 1406, 1406 of Cut the Clutter. We've been around since mid-2018, a long time, and regular watchers would know that China has been a persistent theme. Now, what is the bummer? The bummer is that you've got almost all this quote-unquote wisdom on China from me, and I'm not a domain specialist. I don't know the language. I pick up my knowledge from what is published in international press and also what is published by think tanks and also whatever other research throws up. So I'm an outsider to the domain. What do I do, however, when I find a real domain specialist? A domain specialist with a PhD on one aspect of Chinese diplomacy and politics. Also somebody who lives in Taiwan, which is also China, lives in Taiwan, and also is a columnist, Eye on China columnist for ThePrint. So Sana Hashmi, we know we were staking her out. We were waiting for her to come into Delhi. She came into New Delhi, and there she is. I should actually say Delhi. Why New Delhi? You are an old Delhi wala.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be on Cut the Clutter.
So, first tell us about your specialization and what made you choose the scholarship of China. You have a PhD from JNU, School of International Studies. And what was your PhD and what made you choose China?
I always call myself an academic by chance. It just happened. And I feel when I was starting my master's, which I did from Jamia in Peace and Conflict Studies, China was a buzzword. And India-China relations were very different from how it is today. So I started working at a think tank called Center for Power Studies, but then later I joined JNU and I started working on China's diplomacy in Central Asia. So for my MPhil and my PhD, I have worked on China's diplomacy to a Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And I have been a think tanker for over 14 years now. And now I'm based in Taiwan, and you already mentioned about that. And I'm working on China and Taiwan foreign policy.
And what took you to Taiwan to work there? Why Taipei?
In India, when we work on China, when we talk about China, it's just China. And Taiwan is only studied, or when we talk about Taiwan, when we talk about one China policy. And I think till 2020, that was the case with India, with Taiwan and China. So, going to Taiwan, it was not that everyone was thinking about the strategic communities. Everyone wanted to go to China. So I think an opportunity came for a MOFA fellowship. I applied for it. I got through and I went to Taiwan. I went to Taiwan in early 2020. I was supposed to be there only for 11 months. But then I realized that there is not a lot of familiarity about Taiwan. And by that time, China was becoming more insular. Getting to China, talking to the Chinese was becoming more and more difficult. And there is a saying that if you want to understand China, go to Taiwan, talk to Taiwanese. And I think I learned it early on, and I just decided to stay back, and 4 years and I'm still there.
So I have to learn from you to pronounce it right. It's Taiwan. I think in India, we instinctively tend to say Taiwan.
But in English, it's actually not wrong. So it's Taiwan in English, but then it's Pinyin, Taiwan. But Taiwan
but the local pronunciation will be
Taiwan. Yeah.
That's more proper. So for proper introduction also, Sana is fellow at the Taiwan Asia Exchange Foundation and George H.W. Bush, such as he was, Foundation for US-China Relations. Look at China from where you sit now. In old days, China watchers used to sit in Hong Kong until Hong Kong became more of China, right? Despite the promise of one country, two systems, now Xi Jinping is making Hong Kong, he's molding Hong Kong more in the image of China. So now maybe Taipei is the place for China watchers. So as a China watcher, as one of the very few Indian China watchers, that's a very rare species. How do you look at China now, particularly some of the economic indicators in China? your latest column also that we are publishing today. You talk about declining FDI and concerns in China and what's leading to this. So tell us more about it. You do most of the talking in this episode, not I.
No, I think there are two ways to answer as in how I look at Taiwan, China. First, as someone who's an Indian scholar, who is a China watcher, I feel that there's a lot of interest on China. Of course, its economy is declining, and this is something that as Indian scholars, Indian watchers of China, we are very interested in. But I think we have had a very, very different relationship with China, from a very friendly relationship to now a very hostile one. So I think our perspective and our understanding of China is also changing, and specifically when we are seeing that how China is unwilling to talk to us. So I feel our understanding of China is also becoming less and less vague. But then the second part of my answer is I am also watching at China from Taiwan as an Indian scholar. So I always say that I'm in a very unique position, that I'm not a Taiwanese, I'm not a Western scholar, I'm an Indian scholar who's sitting in Taiwan and looking at China. So I feel that my perception is being influenced by both as an Indian scholar and someone who is a resident of Taipei as well. So I feel that when we talk about China from an Indian perspective and also from a Taiwanese perspective, the first thing that comes to our mind is how its aggression is changing India and Taiwan policy. And I feel that economics is linked to politics as well, for not just for China, as well as for Taiwan and India as well. Perhaps we could talk about it a little later, but I will talk about my column.
Yeah. So if I may put it sort of more simply, what you're trying to say is that because the Chinese are giving us so much grief now, that we are persuaded, we as in India, are persuaded to look at Taiwan more closely. Earlier, because it was one China policy, don't irritate the Chinese, right? So look the other way, as if Taiwan didn't exist.
I think that's a very good way to put it. But I feel that there was always this acknowledgement among Indian policymakers that Taiwan is important. Definitely, there could be more cooperation in the traditional areas of cooperation, such as economics. But now what we have started doing, the Indian policymakers, that they have stopped paying attention to China's red lines. That, we cannot really ignore Taiwan anymore because we are paying attention to China.
Yeah, because China is drawing red lines for everybody everywhere, all over the place.
And also it's not respecting our red lines.
Right.
So I feel that we Indians also have our red lines with respect to the boundary, with respect to the economic cooperation, as well as Indians have been asking about reducing the huge trade imbalance. But then what we are seeing is just increasing every year, despite deficit, but despite having mechanisms in place. So I feel that this idea that, China is not respecting our red lines, so there is no need for us to even go and talk about it anymore.
So what exactly is happening with FDI in China? We know the larger picture. We had also featured it not long ago. Some of the Chinese economic crisis, particularly the collapse of China's big real estate companies, and also the fact that real estate constitutes a very large percentage of China's GDP, nearly 26% now, in India at 6%, right? And in 2016, real estate was 35.8% of China's GDP. So that crisis we've spoken about. But now, in your latest column also, and we see reports everywhere, that China has a real crisis with FDI, because Chinese economy has been built by massive FDI, and now it looks like there's an FDI decline. So how much of it is there? And then we'll go into why it's there.
I think it's definitely a huge concern for the leadership, because we saw that recently Ministry of Commerce came up with the figures that there is actually a huge deficit. It's declining. And also last year we saw that it was over 120 billion of deficit in foreign direct investment coming to China. And this is actually very worrisome for China, because all these years, all these decades, all these foreign companies have been venturing into China, and they established their foothold in China. And I feel that Xi Jinping also, in his New Year message, for the very first time, he talked about, and it's very rare for a Chinese leader to accept that, our economy is not doing well. So he accepted that means there is a problem. And then when it's being added by this problem of decline in foreign direct investment, so that means there is a clear sign that foreign companies are moving out of China. And no matter what, China has been taking advantage of globalization, has been taking advantage of these foreign firms in China.
Modern China is a product of globalization. In fact, it's
yeah.
a brand ambassador of globalization.
But then if you look at it at the same time, they're also being very critical of globalization and calling it a product of, Western domination. And this is a part of Western globalization. So I feel that they're taking advantage of it. But at the same time, they're like, this is all the part of US containment strategy. And they are actually saying that we are okay with it. If you want to go, you can go. But then at the same time, we're also seeing that how they're trying to lure these companies, how they are trying to reform policies
so
to retain them.
Do the Chinese think that they can draw that line, that they can they can exploit that cleavage between, say, the US government and US security and strategic establishment and the US corporate sector?
I think as of now, they're thinking like that because there is, of course, there's consensus that governments are very different from the private sector. And even if you look at the private sector...
Not in China.
Not in China.
China, every private company also has a party office. चाइना में कुछ ऐसे ही होता है जैसे वो देवानंद की फिल्म थी देश परदेश 70s में, उसमें एक लाइन थी, इसमें कितने राज छुपे हैं पूछो मेरे दिल से तुम, बैठे बैठे महफिल से होता है कोई कैसे गुम. तो सब लोग चाइना में गुम जाते हैं. People just disappear. Jack Ma disappeared. Tycoons can disappear. Property tycoons can disappear. Tech tycoons, property tycoons. Top ministers can disappear.
Military officials
can defense minister, external foreign minister, rocket force chief, right? They all disappear. And also film stars, sports stars, they can all disappear like that. So it's a very different kind of system. So if you're a foreign executive working in China and you see this change and you come from a free country, you'd worry. क्योंकि जान सबको प्यारी होती है. जान भी और आजादी भी. Nobody wants to be taken prisoner or nobody wants to be spied on all the time. So those are...
I think government interference is too much in China for these businesses. I think they have dealt with it for a long time. But I feel it's becoming more and more difficult in China now. China is very, very different from how other countries work. But I feel that this was a realization that, no matter what the government is doing, the US government is doing, there is great power rivalry, but the companies will come to us. The big corporate, they would come to us. But I feel with this Europe's de-risking, as well as the great power rivalry, it's actually impacting these companies. But apart from that, it's not easy to do business with China anymore. And then what are you even doing? You have lower interest rate, the economy is slowing down, and then the regulations. And then it's just not about the US that's taking advantage of the great power rivalry and asking its companies to not go to China. But even the Chinese are making it more politicized. The business environment is becoming more and more.
Chinese entrepreneurs and the richer Chinese are leaving or taking their assets out.
Yeah. Like we have seen, it's a very common trend in Hong Kong now. A lot of Hong Kong companies are thinking about it and doing it.
Yeah. And foreign executives also are afraid of going to China because of surveillance, because of what somebody might catch, and some people are arrested. So
and the hostage diplomacy is after the two Michaels, the Canadian Michael.
Although they were not really such nice guys as it turned out. They were both Canadian crooks. It says that Canadian crooks and spies, lying, spying crooks. Although Canadians tend to be so holier than cow, if I may.
No, definitely. We have witnessed that as well with India.
Yeah. So FDI. If I read your article, the big data points are that between Jan and July last year, China saw inflows decline, FDI inflows decline by $118 billion. That is serious change, right? And then you say after July, in the 3 months after July, that is July to September, it declined by another 11.8 billion.
It's close to 120 billion. Imagine in 9 months.
Yeah. So and it looks like there is no bottom to it. Why is this happening, and which investors are going away fastest?
I think there are multiple factors behind it. I've already talked about how the economy is slowing down, and also it's not a country where you could go to the government and say that we are having issues and you have to have reform. Of course, we have seen the State Council has come up with some measures, 24 measures last year, and then Premier Li Qiang also has been holding meetings to reform the economic policies, but there are economic interests that are not best suited to these companies anymore. And some of the investments have also matured. So now the way forward for these companies to go somewhere else or continue doing business in China. So I feel that there is these companies, and I also in my article, I have quoted this survey by European Chamber of Commerce in China. So according to the survey, a lot of companies, like 2/3 of the companies that were surveyed, losing confidence in doing business in China. And I feel for these companies, of course, there are factors, and of course, the factors would be there, the problems will be there with other countries as well. But with China, there is the influence of the interference of government is so much and so that these companies are like, there is a domino effect. There is a trend that other companies are moving to countries such as Vietnam, Indonesia, India. So why not we go and be a part of the growth story of countries such as India and Vietnam? Why do we have to put up with something that the Chinese are doing? And then apart from that, it's just not that there are economic factors. There are a lot of political factors that we are seeing. China, and specifically under Xi Jinping, there is frequent weaponization of trade and investment. Then there is economic coercion. So there is no segregation between economics and politics in China, and the lines are getting blurred.
So the old era is gone when Deng Xiaoping said, keep politics and economics on two sides, right? Should be separate. Let's build our wealth. Let's build our strength. And basically, he put these into two separate compartments. Xi Jinping has lifted that dividing partition between the two compartments.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that Xi Jinping did when he came to power was to undo specifically Deng Xiaoping's policies, like hide your time, bide your strength. This is something that we have been seeing specifically in a lot of military conflict. Look at South China Sea, look at Taiwan, and economic policies as well. So I feel that this is a part of Xi Jinping's legacy, that, I am very different. I'm going to be here for the rest of my life. I'm the president of life for life. So this is how I do things.
So if I put it like stealing some words from Deng Xiaoping, I think he said to Rajiv Gandhi that there is this border problem, but maybe our generation does not have the wisdom to resolve it. Leave it to a wiser generation. So leave it to day after tomorrow. In Xi Jinping's view, day after tomorrow is today. Should have been day before yesterday. That means should have been in Deng Xiaoping's time. So there is a complete repudiation of Deng Xiaoping's politics.
It's a very interesting point how Deng Xiaoping said that we are not wise enough and let's focus on other aspect of the relationship. But when he mentioned that, he actually focused on strengthening relationship, like how India-China relationship was strengthened, or at least there was this willingness and effort to stabilize the relationship. There were a number of agreements that were signed in the 1990s, 2000, and also how Rajiv Gandhi went on this landmark visit, then Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Narasimha Rao. It was a very different period. But I think when it comes to Xi Jinping, the idea is that I think he's following Deng Xiaoping's policy when it comes to the resolution, but when it comes to the escalation in tensions in India-China boundary dispute, I think he is just doing everything to make it worse and worse. As in, the relationship is definitely normal. There is no willingness from the Chinese side to resolve the issue, but it's not that it's actually on the back burner. The boundary dispute is very much at the forefront. So when the Chinese today are saying that, let's just focus on other aspects of the relationship, that was the policy of Deng Xiaoping as well.
Right.
But they are just ramping up tensions.
Now they're saying, but what that means is that you overlook all our transgressions.
Yes. And focus on other aspects, but where also we are not going to give you concessions.
Right. So we talk about FDI declining. So American companies bring a lot of FDI into China, but there are also others. Japanese bring a lot, but Taiwanese bring a lot, right? In fact, Taiwanese bring probably the largest for FDI to China after America. How does it stack
I think
up?
it's definitely going down. So I don't think it's because I think in 2022, 34% of the FDI that was going out from Taiwan was going to China. Now it's just 11%. So I think it's Taiwan
34% to 11% means it's less than 1/3.
It was very because earlier there was a lot of business connection between Taiwan and China, and Taiwan, because there was a lot of familiarity, same language, same race somewhat. So, and they knew how to deal with the Chinese. So, specifically after when Lee
I like the way you
came,
say same race somewhat, because that's very much a Taiwanese view.
I think this is, but I think this is actually a fact that how Taiwanese are viewing themselves very different from the Chinese. The identity is changing. The way they function is very different from how the Chinese function. But yeah, a lot of businesses went to China, and China has been their first preference to do business. But after DPP came to power and after the 1992 consensus was revoked by DPP, we have seen that
DPP is the party that came to... it's a
Democratic Progressive Party.
Democratic Progressive Party, which is the pro-independence party.
I would call it a pro-status quo party because there are lot of different factions. So one faction,
they blow hot and cold.
Yes, but I would say that if I have to define them in one way, I would definitely call them a status quo party. But I think it's very individualistic.
But before elections, somebody gets up and becomes more pro-independence. The guy who got elected now, in his campaign, etc., has sounded more pro-independence?
I think generally he is, as in he has openly talked about his views on Taiwan should be an independent country. But I think once he became the candidate for the president, he mellowed down and he told the party line, sighing when the current president who's stepping down because they have this rule of two-term rule for president. So I think he is very much, whatever his personal views are, that is not really coming to the forefront, and he has accepted that when he's in power, he's definitely going to promote status quo, and he's open to for a dialogue with China.
So where is Taiwanese investment going now? They can't invest so much in Taiwan.
And now I think there's saturation. They're definitely looking at Southeast Asia, some of the countries such as Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, and definitely India. Of course, a long way to go for India, but we've already seen how Taiwan's Foxconn is coming to India, expanding operations in India, which is Apple's main manufacturer. And we recently saw that how India has awarded the third highest civilian award, Padma Bhushan, to Taiwan's chairman and CEO, Yang Liu. And also, Yang Liu was the chief guest at 2023 Semicon India. And he assured Modi that Taiwan is your reliable partner. And when you are developing semiconductor ecosystem, we would be there for you. If not the entire semiconductor industry of Taiwan, but at least Foxconn will be there. And he also said that Prime Minister Modi told him that IT is equal to India and Taiwan. And Modi, I saw the body language, Modi actually nodded when he was on this stage. So even though we do not talk about Taiwan openly, which I feel that we are doing it now, but we know that how important Taiwan for us when we talk about semiconductor, when we talk about attracting investment. So I definitely feel that MediaTek, Foxconn are some of the companies that are seriously looking at India.
So what is the biggest negative with Xi Jinping's style?
I think his aggression and his this idea that I have to project that today's China is a strong China and we stand up to the bullies. But what are these bullies? It depends on who you ask. If you ask the US, if you ask India, if you ask Philippines, it is China. But for China, every other country is a bully. So I feel this
Even little Taiwan is a bully, although we have to be careful saying that in the context of countries.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly. As in every country is a bully. So I feel this idea that a non-concessionary, non-negotiable approach of dealing with countries is something that I find one of the negative aspects of Xi Jinping foreign policy.
And that is what is now getting foreign investors jittery?
I think this is definitely one of the reasons. I think even though we have talked about how private sector corporates are different from the government, but they do work in alignment with the government as well. When the entire Europe is talking about de-risking, of course, actions do not match words and it's a different thing altogether. But
Europe, I want trust. Because they say these things in whispers, but do something else on the side.
Yeah, specifically France and Germany when it comes to China. But if you look at
France is not, the French are not hypocritical.
They are not. But I feel it's also easier said than done. We say today that we want to decouple, we want to de-risk, but then no one actually knows how do we achieve that.
We as in India.
We Indians, and also yes. I would give the benefit of the doubt to the French as well and some of the other European countries that are serious about diversifying. So, but I feel I see some kind of push specifically from the smaller Central Eastern European countries.
And particularly the Baltics.
Yeah, totally. As in they're
small countries, but
Yeah, but they are then giving it back to the Chinese. As I look at the Lithuanian administration, look at the Czech Republic is just totally different from how Germany is reacting and responding to the Chinese. But then also, US has been putting in a lot of policies and really encouraging its businesses, corporates to go out of China and come back to the US and invest in a lot of other countries. So I feel when the great power competition is going on, countries are also like, we don't know what's going to happen with China. We don't know what policies the US is going to employ. So is it going to impact our businesses? So I feel that this is something that's definitely a lot of consultancy firms are getting into, a lot of companies are thinking. So I do feel that it's not really working in China's advantage. But when I'm saying it, it doesn't mean that China is going to fall tomorrow, that they slow down.
So we need to understand that well. It's not as if the Chinese economy is declining. It is that the Chinese economy is still growing, but the economic growth rate has declined quite substantially.
Yes.
And Chinese economy was the engine of the global economic growth.
As in, it's still the manufacturing hub of the world.
Yes.
So
China's decline affects everybody. Of course, in the same period, American economy has grown. It's a much larger economy, which is a positive, but Chinese economic decline is what everybody feels at this point. I will ask you a triple question instead of asking you three questions. How important is Taiwan for China? How important is China for Taiwan? And how should India navigate this Taiwan equation?
I think all are very good and vast questions. And I think this triangle, China, Taiwan, India, all these three countries are very important to each other. So when we talk about the importance of Taiwan for China, we know that how China has been claiming Taiwan since 1949 when they took over the mainland. But then I feel that, of course, it's strategically, it's very important, the position of Taiwan, but it's a different thing altogether. But for Xi Jinping legacy, it is becoming more and more important. I think if he has to prove that, he's a president for life, one thing he would really want to happen is that Taiwan should reunify. This is Chinese language, reunify with the motherland. So I think this is a part of Xi Jinping legacy. And this is, I feel, the most important aspect of how China and Xi Jinping sees Taiwan.
And if Taiwan does not want to reunify, you think Xi Jinping will use force to make it happen?
So first of all, with this word reunify, so there is this common narrative and perception, and I think that's a fact, that Taiwan was never a part of China. It was ruled by the Japanese Qing dynasty, but it was never ruled by the PRC.
Yeah, it also had a local population, native population.
Native population. So this idea that, China keeps saying that we will reunify with we'll reunify Taiwan with the motherland. So this idea, so this is a narrative, this is an argument that has been given by the Taiwanese. I do not see invasion happening anytime soon. Of course, Xi Jinping would still want to reunify it peacefully. But of course, he has also said recently, and he has been saying it for the past 2-3 years, that I would also use force if I have to. But I do not see invasion happening anytime soon. First of all, we have just talked about the economic domestic issues that China has been dealing. So it doesn't have resources right now to deal with it and is still in the process of PLA modernization. But apart from that, it's just not going to be a war between China and Taiwan. It is definitely going to get the US into the scene, then also Japanese. And apart from that, now we have AUKUS, now we have Quad. So all these countries, it's just not the US. And I feel that, of course, there is policy of strategic ambiguity when it comes to the US coming to Taiwan aid in case of an invasion. But despite that...
But there is a law there.
As in, if it's
in the US.
If it's an invasion, if it's an unprovoked invasion, definitely I feel that we do not have any doubt that the US will come to Taiwan's rescue. But I feel that now even India is thinking about Taiwan. Not that it is thinking of a military role in a Taiwan contingency, but I do see that India is seriously thinking about what is going to happen if China invades Taiwan. Because if Taiwan falls under China, it's just not in any country's interest. Imagine how strategically how significant Taiwan's position is. And it's in the South China Sea. It will be much easier for the Chinese to exert dominance on the South China Sea, on the wider Indian Ocean. Yeah, as far as Taiwan is concerned, what it is trying to do is to minimize the importance of China for its businesses, for economy, as well as politically as well. And we are seeing since the DPP came to power, what they have started doing is to reach out to like-minded countries in the region. Of course, a long way to go. Lack of diplomatic relation is definitely a problem, but we are seeing despite that, a lot of countries are talking to Taiwan, are talking about Taiwan. No conference is complete without talking about the Taiwan question. So Taiwan is definitely moving away from China and moving towards countries such as US, Japan, and I would say India as well.
Yeah. So the way I look at the picture, China wants Taiwan to reunify. On the other hand, China is a country that has, or a system that's gone from being a less illiberal system from when it began to grow under Deng Xiaoping to becoming a much less liberal system. Yeah. So it was never democratic. So Chinese would object to that. They say they have the best democracy in the world, right? But from being relatively liberal and diplomatic to be much more dictatorial now. Absolutely. Whereas Taiwan, on the contrary, started out as a dictatorship under a martial law and has now become a very robust democracy. Absolutely. So don't you see the two moving in different directions?
Still, as in, this is a very good way to put it. And this is something that we have also been seeing, that how, in fact, from Taiwan side as well, this is the narrative that they have been trying to project, that perhaps we are an alternative to China and a democratic alternative to China, but we are also very, very different from the Chinese. And it's not just a robust democracy. I would say that that is a perfect democracy that we are witnessing in Taiwan. And I think this is the narrative that, China is China, Taiwan is Taiwan, and we are very different. So this is something that is that is becoming a policy of the administration as well.
Can the democracy of Taiwan also influence the public opinion in China, or does it?
I think we don't know what actually happens within the local people, but if you just go by the social media, which I also don't really see it as the perception of the local people, because when you go and talk to the local people, they actually have a very different idea. And also there is a lot of familial connections between Taiwan and China. So I think it's a very different narrative when we are on the ground. But if you just look at the social media, definitely they are towing the government line. But also these are the accounts that are
in China, yes.
That are it's mostly by the trolls and the government-owned media.
How closely do you follow the Chinese social media?
I do follow social media, and I would say that it's nothing different from Global Times or CGT and Xinhua.
I see. So you don't get any other diversity of views
It's there. It's very much there. But I feel that, there is so much censorship. Even if someone who's saying anything that is against the government, they just censor the word. They just censor the account. So it's definitely there. And this is why I said that there are a lot of people in China and they have different view. Not everyone is just doing what the government is saying. Not everyone is saying that, China should invade Taiwan.
Before I let you go, how did you handle the language challenge? I know there is a culture challenge, there is a food challenge, there is a lifestyle challenge, but the language challenge is the biggest. How did you handle it?
Then I've been there for 4 years. So all these food, language and all these challenges, I think I have kind of surpassed that. And I'm accommodated, and Taiwan is a very welcoming place.
And how good is your knowledge of the language?
It's manageable. It's good.
Can you write? I know you can read. Can you write?
I can read, but I think reading is much better.
Much better.
I just don't like my writing in the character.
And you can converse, obviously.
Yes.
So that's what makes you such a brilliant asset for India. To have a young Indian scholar with genuine scholarship and domain knowledge living in Taiwan and Taipei, watching China. And you know what? I'm also trying to remind you how much valuable it is for us that she is a columnist on ThePrint. So please do check out her column every week, Eye on China.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sana.